Welcome back, guys, to Over Unders with me, Germani DePena, as well as my main man, Matt Hanafan. Going to be talking about the National League East this time around, obviously consisting of potentially three 90-game winners, judging by the over unders for some of the top teams in the NL East. But yeah, National League East had some big acquisitions, especially for one of the teams we're going to be talking about, the Mets. But Matt, I hand you the floor. Matt, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. I know this is not baseball related, but it's conference tournament week for basketball, which is a lot of fun. March Madness is here, but what's also here is spring training. And we're in the thick of spring training. Opening days 16 days away, I think, by my count. So I'm very excited for that day to officially come. But I'm doing good, man. How about you?
I'm good. Like you said, spring training or not spring training, MLB season is not too far away. I finally got a calendar and I marked in the calendar MLB opening day. So, I'm moving up in the world now, updating my setup a little bit. But obviously enough about my aesthetic in my office. But I'm doing good. You're doing good. Who is not doing good is the Miami Marlins, and that's the team we're going to start with. We're going to start with bottom of the barrel is an understatement. I know I referenced bottom of the barrel in the American League East video we did, but yeah, Marlins are a new low, and they are slated for 63 and a half wins. Last year they had a staggering 62 wins, and this is when they still had guys like Jazz Chisholm, who obviously got traded to your Yankees last year. Maybe the only redeeming quality about this team is the fact that Sandy Alcantara is back from Tommy John. But yeah, I'll hand you the floor, Matt, so you can kind of dive into the hole that is the Miami Marlins.
The Marlins, I mean, yeah, you mentioned Sandy. I think like having him back after he got Tommy John's like obviously a good thing. I don't And I say that in the sense that like if he has a good half season, you could net a lot of like Peter Bendix could net a lot of value for him on the trade market. I think he still can anyway, just because former NL Cy Young winner, like he's like Sandy's an ace. He's that guy at the top of the rotation. I still can't believe they got Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers in the Trevor Rogers trade last year. Like that, Trevor Rogers wasn't good, and they were still able to get that, which is kind of crazy to me. And I don't think he's healthy right now. Um, for the Orioles, but that's neither here nor there. They did lose. They also lost Jake Berger, which I think he was like good for them last year in the little time that he actually did play for them. Um, so he's not there. Jesus Sanchez in the middle of that lineup is okay. Um, my like Xavier Edwards, I think could have like a breakout year at shortstop. I know he did some stuff like not in like a partial of a season last year. Uh, Edward Cabrera, Max Mayer, like Mayer could be someone else who like kind of breaks out. He's one of their I want to say he was like a former like top 5 pick or top 3 pick in the draft. But other than that, there's not a whole lot to look forward to other than just like they just have to continue to stack prospects, I guess. Like every single time they've at least gotten someone decent, they've traded him away. I think Bendix did a better job than some of their other general managers, but it's too little to tell yet just because this is his second full season as the GM. So
Right, right. And it's funny that you brought up Xavier Edwards because I think he's probably maybe the one like shining star in a sense in that entire on the offensive side for the Marlins. I think he's going to be real fun to watch if he's able to pick up where he left off in 2024. Um and funny enough, he was a race prospect, and like
yeah,
they had high hopes for him, and then obviously ends up in Miami. But Otto Lopez, he was good for the Marlins last year. I believe it was Otto Lopez.
yeah, I
Um,
forgot about him. Yeah, Otto
yeah,
Lopez.
really good playing over there at second base. And obviously like they have things to like somewhat get excited about. Like you said, the it's really gonna be the saga of Sandy this season. Obviously kind of see where not necessarily where he fits, is kind of how what kind of Sandy Alcantara you're gonna get. and yeah, just see what you're gonna get for him. It's kind of like the it was kind of like the Garrett Crochet, Dylan Cease kind of thing with the White Sox. They, like pitching stellar, and you kind of knew they were going to get traded, but more of a matter of when. And you can kind of just pencil in a lot of those guys like Jesus Sanchez, Alcantara, maybe some others, to be right there out the door. Because even dating back to the trade deadline last year, you had guys like not Burger. It was what's his face, lefty arm who signed with the Dodgers. For the
Oh,
life of me, I
Tanner
can't.
Scott.
Tanner Scott, yeah, like
Yeah, he was
Tanner Scott
great.
traded Chaz,
Yeah.
and like all these guys, and um, actually Tanner Scott didn't get moved, right? He
Yeah,
became a
he did.
free agent. No, he did get moved.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was San Diego, wasn't it?
You're right. You're right. I don't know why I was drawing a blank on that, but he gets traded to San Diego. But point still stands is that they were sending out a bunch of these guys to get what they could for him. And shout out to the social media team for the Marlins because they just kept having to swap players and saying farewell and farewell and farewell. So, like you said, it's not much to really talk about the Marlins. For them to be 63 and a half wins, like honestly, I think I would probably take the under because 62. So like I feel like this would
Taking the
probably
under.
be the easiest one to decide on for the Marlins anyway. But yeah, like they're probably a good 3 or 4 years out. And then who's to say that like there's another hiccup in the road, and then they build a little nice little core, and then end up trading all those guys again. Like
Yeah.
even if they win the World Series in a few years, probably end up trading everybody again. Like that's what the
Yeah.
Marlins do. So it's not a whole lot to be excited about if you're a Marlins fan. And I feel for you guys because um, like not even like pushing nearly 10 years now. You had one of the best young outfields in baseball with Stanton, Ozuna, and Yelich, and all those guys picked pretty much uh, grew on their career paths with other teams, obviously. So yeah, like I feel for Miami Marlins fans, but yeah, there's not a whole lot to get excited. So they're for me definitely dead last in the National League East.
Also, I didn't even mention this. It was one of the most under talked about storylines of the off season. They just let go of Skip Schumacher, who won NL Manager of the Year as in his first year as a manager, and he's just they just kicked him to the like Peter just kicked him to the road after his second season. For what reason?
That's another big problem is like if you're going to be bad and you're going to be in rebuild mode, the least you can do is try to have some sort of stability. Look at the Orioles. When the Orioles were losing 100 games a season, they still had I was about to say his last name's Hyde, but what's his first name? It's oh
Brandon.
my goodness. Brandon Hyde. I was thinking of a Red Sox content creator with the same last name, but 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 Brandon Hyde, and they stuck it out with him, and he was helping he got this team to on a 100 win season. So it's for me, I'm big when it comes to stability, it comes to longevity with some of these guys because a lot of these young players would be best to be working with a similar coaching staff as they grow into proper major league players. But I mean, hey, the Marlins wanted to. I feel like the Marlins worked their way into the position they're in now, for better or for worse, depending on I guess who you are. But yeah, stability I think goes a long way, especially for a situation like that. Okay, but moving on to a far better, by comparison, a far better situation in the Washington Nationals. The Washington Nationals have a lot of young talent. They finished with 71 wins last year, and obviously they had call ups of James Wood. Um, I forget his. I know it's Alex Young. I think it's Alex Young. I think center fielder for him. Obviously you have
Jacob Young.
Jacob Young. I don't know why I thought Alex Young. My apologies, but Dylan Cruz and others. Like they have a lot of young guys out there, and they brought in Nathaniel Lowe through they brought in Nathaniel Lowe, and it seems like at worst the Nationals are going to be a fun team. But Matt, I'll hand it to you. How do you think about the Nationals?
I like this young core of players with Abrams, with Dylan Cruz, with James Wood. They traded for Nathaniel Lowe, who was very available after Texas got Jake Berger. It felt like there was some redundancy there, and so they parted with him. I like that a lot for them. I'm a guy who's 29, 30 years old, very good plate discipline, has some power. I know he's hit for low average in some years, but I still think there are tools there. Jacob Young, like you mentioned earlier. Uh, Luis Garcia is another one. I'm not as high on Garcia as some. I actually don't know how many people are high on Luis Garcia, but I'm not super high on him. But he's somewhat of like a decent piece. He's more of like a platoon piece in my head. They were able to bring in Soroka, kind of like a buy low. Remember how touted he was when he was in Atlanta. Mackenzie Gore is someone who I like, even though oddly enough, I believe he struggled against like left-handed pitching a bunch, with or left-handed hitting, which is weird because he is a lefty. Um, but no, I think this team, like, I still don't think they're going to be good at all. But like, they have some pieces. Like, I know the back of their bullpen's a little bit older. They're these maybe guys that get traded, like Finnegan, Jorge Lopez, Derek Law. Um, Lucas Sims, like I, they're a couple of them might get moved um, at the deadline. There's other guys around this roster who may get moved too. I'm not sure what their contract situations look like necessarily, but just at the top, I love their young pieces, or at least they have, I think, a good foundation. Josh Bell was another one that we didn't mention that they signed. Just a veteran switch hitter who he's a power bat. He can hit from either side. Um, but no, I like some of these pieces that Washington has. It's just I think they're still a couple years away though.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think I remember I was talking to Dom in a previous video, and when we got to the Nationals, I said that the youth movement, which is guys like James Wood, are going to absolutely, I feel, ball out. So at least if you're a Nationals fan in that point of view, I think that for them, I think those are going to be players you can be excited for. Like James Wood, a 6'7" left fielder with just power for days. I think he's going to be the cream of the
And
crop
speed.
out of those guys. I know, yeah, and speed. And yeah, with the Nationals being slated for 72 and a half wins, I'm gonna take the over. I'm gonna take the over on them. Maybe it's not by a lot, but I still think that they have there's a lot of pieces there to get excited for. And I mean, them winning 71 games last year, I think that's a benchmark they can hit again. And I still think like there's gonna be a stretch of the season when they're looked at as like, oh, you check out this exciting team. It's like they may not be anywhere near the playoff race, but at the same time, they're still just building that foundation, and hopefully, maybe in a year or so, or maybe a couple years down the line, they're able to supplement that young group with an established player to kind of really put that team over the top. So who knows? Like sometimes these rebuilds get accelerated just with one move. So it's gonna be real interesting to see how the Nationals perform in the next couple of years. But I have them over 72 and a half wins this year.
Given the division they play in, I think 72 is like a fair number. Just because like when you have to face the Mets, the Phillies, uh, and the Braves that many times, I don't know. Like it's not as much as it used to be, obviously, with how they changed the scheduling. Oh man, I'll say like maybe a slight over. I don't feel good either way about it though. Because
Hmm.
I do like this again, I do like the young core this team has. I think the 72 and a half has moved up since the market opened. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. I'll say they won 71 last year. I kind of see them are just around the same this year. Obviously, you're hoping for multiple players taking a leap, but whenever it comes to like the deadline, again, I don't know who they would trade specifically, but like I don't know. I'll say a slight over. I'll say they get 73 this year. But it's like if you told me they got 71 again, I wouldn't be surprised at all. It's like a
Fair.
51-49 split in my head.
That's fair enough. And so everyone out there, keep an eye out. I would say James Woods in particular is going to be the guy to pop off.
Yeah.
I'll even go as far to say that he could possibly clip 30 home runs in his first full season. I'll throw that wild take out there.
Okay.
All right, let's get to some of the big boys in the National League East. There's three of them, of course, but let's talk about the Mets. I think the Mets will probably be the most fun to talk about, at least at the moment, because obviously the big move is them bringing in Juan Soto. Um, Matt, I know that hit home for you. I'm sorry, but but the Mets are slated at 90 and a half wins. Obviously, mentioned Soto. They were managed to retain Pete Alonso, and they brought back others like Jesse Winker, who was big for their postseason push last year, and bringing back Sean Manaea. So, Matt, what is your opinion for your Yankees' crosstown rival, New York Mets?
Isn't Manaea supposed to start the season on the IL?
I believe
I
so.
think so. And Frankie Montas, who they also got injured because their rotation's taken a hit with a couple of those injuries. Not that they have like a terrible rotation or anything. I don't feel great about it though. With Senga, Peterson's been like a kind of a slept on veteran, but I still wouldn't love him as my number two in just a perfect world. Clay Holmes is converting to a starter. I believe he was a starter in the minors for a while. And then, I mean, he's looked really good in spring. Like, if I'm being completely fair, like looked really good in like his limited sample in spring. I'm very curious to see like him ramping back up for 130, 140, 150 plus innings, how he looks as the season goes on. Just because, again, like for years in the majors, or at least when he was with the Yankees, just he was their closer, or at least for part of last year he was, but for most of his tenure he was a closer. And so, like, he was in a lot of high leverage situations. Obviously, I think him being a ground ball pitcher, him not generating a ton of swing and misses. Um, I didn't it didn't help him, especially with the Yankees defense not being as good as it is this year, at least how we're perceiving it to be this year. Um, and so I'm very interested to see how he does again. He's looked really good in spring, but uh, over a full season, I'm interested to see how he progresses. But he's currently their number three. Uh, McGill is someone who I feel like's been like due for a breakout, but I don't think he's like quite broken out. Like he's been fine, but he hasn't been like I think what he's been touted to be. I mean, 4.04 ERA last year. Um, started 15 games, 10.5 Ks per nine, despite having 3.7 walks per nine. It's not great. It's not terrible. Either Griffin Cannings just rounds out the rotation. They just needed another body with Montas and with Manaea hurt. But obviously, when you look at the lineup, yes, they get Juan Soto. They break my heart. Juan Soto breaks my heart. But on paper, I love this lineup, especially the top half of it with Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Nimmo, Vientos. Like Vientos was really, really good last year. I'm very interested to see if he can kind of replicate that same production. He'll have a lot of opportunities where he's trying to drive in runs, and I think he was just from memory, he was like good in that department last year. Winker's okay. Jose Series, all right. Jeff McNeil's been one of those like pesky at bats. Like I know the average hasn't been as high as it once was when I he won the batting title once. No, am I just misremembering that?
No, no, no. That yeah, I believe that definitely happened. I think it was
Yeah,
2022. If I have
but
to take a guess.
he's always that pesky at bat. Like yeah, I know he doesn't have a whole lot of power, but for someone at the bottom of your lineup in the 8-9 hole, like he's someone who's going to be a tough out. Like that's a pretty deep lineup, I would say, with like an okay-ish rotation to complement that. Um, I mean, I think Edwin Diaz is awesome when he's healthy. They have some dudes like toward the back end of that bullpen. Uh, I would feel better about it. I also think Francisco Alvarez is currently hurt right now. I'm not. Yeah, he just
He's gonna miss about 6 to 8 weeks, something
yeah.
like that.
I'd feel much better about this lineup if they had him and not Luis Torrens. But at the same time, I still think this is like a really good lineup for 6 or 7 of the 9 spots. Uh, and again, they have like 3 really good hitters with Lindor, Soto, and Alonso. So that just in and of itself is awesome on paper. Um, so I what's their over under?
Their over under is 90 and a half wins, and they finished last year with 89.
Ooh,
I say
that's another
because
one.
keep in mind if you take the over, then that's
Yeah,
you would think that's like division winner territory, but
I'm giving it a slight under, but I would say like 90 is like where I'm at with them. Just
okay.
because of like the uncertainty with their pitching staff if Manaea is not going to be able to. Because again, like Manaea was awesome last year. I think he kind of found something towards the beginning of the season or toward the end of the season, but oblique injuries are weird, man. Like I know it's worse for hitters than they are for pitchers, but that's still like a weird injury. Same thing with lat injuries with in Montas's case. Like I don't know. Maybe it's
Uh,
easier for pitchers to recover from oblique injuries than it is for hitters. Because I know for hitters, like when you're generating that torque, that's a little bit tough. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to sit here and act like I know everything that happens with oblique injuries, especially with pitchers. But
right.
um, I just know those two guys missing most of, if not all of spring. That's going to be tricky for them to incorporate them in the middle of the season. Not saying they can't make additional moves, even though Steve Cohen is just completely blown past the Cohen tasks, and I don't know if he's. Even he like even I remember reading quote like even he sounds a little apprehensive about like continuing to do that. Just because of the how strenuous that is on your cap sheet and like I still think this team is in play to win the division, no doubt. But I would say a slight under at 90 wins. I think that's fair. No,
I I would agree with you. I would agree with you. Like, yes, they get they on paper they get tremendously better with Juan Soto, but I would say because I'm going to take the under with you. I'm going to take the under with you, but obviously it's small. I don't think it's the addition of Soto is going to catapult them into um like the absolute elite of that division because obviously there's still two more teams we're yet to talk about, but I think and this is just from my perspective, I think Juan Soto is gonna piss away a couple of games for him just with his defense. Like I could see
oh
it.
man,
I
maybe.
could I hey, he made a spectacular play in spring training already. The ball flew right over his fucking head if I remember correctly. But but it's like something like that. Like I think they'll drop a game or two with like the ball getting hit to Soto and then he finds a way to like just muff it or but that's not gonna be the sole reason. Like to your point, like Shamanaya, he definitely found something last year. And his trick was that he was starting to adopt the cross arm delivery that Chris Sale
Yeah.
uses, and obviously you saw how successful it was for someone like Sale. So he started using that and became a far more effective pitcher. And I believe he even said, and this is kind of ironic, it like took a little bit less took more stress off of his arm, but um, don't quote me on that. But regardless, he emerged as the unsung ace of that staff with oh my god, why can't I remember his name? Their ace from Japan.
Senga.
Yeah,
It's
Kodai
been a
Senga.
rough
Thank
day
you.
for you in names.
Oh my, yeah, that's my fault. Like they're gonna come for me in the comments because I can't remember
It's
star
okay.
player. It's all over
It
the
happens to
place.
the best.
Oh yeah, for sure. Kodai Senga, and obviously, hopefully, a full off season for Kodai Senga and can get back to where he was because that ghost fork is gnarly. But obviously, he got torched in the postseason for them. Um, but regardless of that fact, the pitching side is obviously the thing you're probably most concerned about because you don't know how Clay Holmes is going to pitch for a full season as a starter, or he's even going to make it that far. Because sometimes that guys who were relievers turned starters could easily peter out near the second half of the year when the stress levels on their arms start it starts getting more and more stressful because you're pitching longer than you're used to, especially that deep into the season. Or you can turn into someone like Seth Lugo in Kansas City and become the ace of that staff. Um, so it's a tale of two different stories in that sense for pitchers. But yeah,
There's
Soto
a
for the
world. Oh, go on, finish what you're gonna say.
I was gonna dive into bringing in Soto. Obviously, it raises the floor and the ceiling of the Mets offensively. Like I think, like every time the Mets play at this point, they're gonna be must watch. No, but yeah, there's a lot of good. But I'll let you continue your thought.
No, I was just gonna say like there's a world where like Clay Holmes becomes a pitcher where he makes 25 starts, has a 3.5 ERA, and you know has a strikeout rate of like 15 to 20%. Like if that's something like I'm just looking at fan graphs right now. Steamer has him finishing with 23 games started, 3.6 ERA, 3.7 FIP, 3.7 FFIP or XFIP, which is expected FIP, with a 21.7% strikeout rate. So what I just said was relative, like around his like projection.
Hmm.
There's a world where that actually does, like, come into existence, like, again, like, as a closer, he had around a 25% strikeout rate, even though he didn't miss a whole lot of bats, like, just in general. I wanna say he had a swinging strike rate around, like, 10 to 11% each year, which is just around league average, and so it's not like he was missing an insane amount of bats, but I think, again, him being in lower leverage situations, like, could help him. 'Cause we've seen, like, how nasty he is at his peak, especially just with his sinker and slider. And if, he's able to consistently add a third pitch, like, I wanna say he is adding a third pitch. I can't remember what it is off the
I think it
top
was
of
a
my
I
head.
think I wanna say it was a cutter, but I'm not
Yeah,
entirely sure.
it was something like that, but if he's able to just continue to add to his arsenal while, like, pitching again 130, 40, 100, 130, 140 innings, like, there's a world where he actually becomes, like, a legitimately good functional starter in the middle of that rotation, but it's like m more or less, it's a question mark because we don't really know, um,
Right.
what that's gonna look like against MLB hitters, especially nowadays when you have to make like, not a lot of managers will have their pitchers go 3 times around the order, but you still gotta go twice. Like, what does that look like for him? How is he gonna make those adjustments on the fly? I think to some extent, it's gonna be, a little bit of a work in progress, but just as like a ground ball pitcher, I think, he'll be able to generate outs in that way with a better infield defense than he had last year.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I would say, far better in that sense anyway because, but yeah, but for Holmes, I think the biggest concern for me would be durability in terms of
yeah,
like we've seen pitchers make the transition from reliever to starter. And yeah, to your point, if he can get anywhere near that stat line, it'll be a success. That's a successful pickup for
100%.
the Mets. And yeah, to your point, it's like he may not have been the guy who was striking everybody out and getting whiffs, but he was the guy who can get big outs. And sometimes a ground out is probably a lot more effective than, a strikeout in certain situations. It's like, um,
Well, double play ball, but other than
yeah,
that, not
pretty much.
really.
But in any case, I think the pitching obviously is the more of the red flag between that and the offense. And yeah, I already spoke about Soto. I don't know if we brought up Brandon Nimmo while while discussing all this because I believe he had himself a pretty solid season. Obviously, for me, with Brandon Nimmo, he's like one of the more, especially now with a lot of the big faces that the Mets have. He's definitely kind of like hidden, so he might be the biggest beneficiary out of all the guys that the Mets have now. Um, and yeah, so I think Soto's slated for a big season. Lindor, he's consistently been one of the best shortstops in the game. Um, Definitely in the National League, he's definitely, if not probably the best, but it depends. Um, but yeah, like Lindor still fantastic. They bring in the star power in Soto. Pete Alonso coming back is great for them. It's like I like they have a roster that can be built for October. It's just obviously more about how if they're not necessarily if they're going to make the dance, but obviously there's still two juggernauts in a sense in front of them that they're going to have to contend with. But they planted the seeds to really like the Mets can really be something in the next couple of years for sure. Um, this season's going to be real interesting just to see the first season of Soto and yeah how that pitching staff holds up is going to be pretty intriguing as well. Hopefully, Edwin Diaz he could stay healthy for the entirety of the season and he can be able to celebrate as normal.
Yeah.
So like I don't want a repeat of when they beat the Phils in the postseason last year and he literally couldn't move around. They just said stand in place and shake your arms. But
You
yeah, I like the Mets.
you mentioned Nimmo. Yeah, he was someone last year, 225 batting average, 401 slugging. He hit 23 homers, but I'm just looking at the StatCast data now. He batted 20 points below his expected batting average, which is just based on launch angle and exit velocity. 9 points below his expected slugging, and then his WOBA, his weighted on base average, he was 15 points below his expected weighted on base average. And he outperformed in previous seasons. He was around a 130 weighted runs created plus in 2023, and then he sunk down to 109 last year. And so, if you're looking for like a happy medium, like a 117, 118, I think you could live with that. And he's also going to be someone who's going to be protected by Vientos. And not that Vientos is like a crazy power bat, but he was very productive last year.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
especially like in the world where he's slotted in the four hole. Like obviously you can move Nimmo around the top half of that lineup if you want to. Like I expect him to hit four somewhere in that range because I know Soto, Lindor, and Alonso are going to take up that three in some order. But if there's a day off where Nimmo's hitting one and Lindor has a day off, or whatever the case, I don't know like whatever the case is, like you have like a solid player, solid base runner, doesn't strike out a whole lot, will get on base, like he's had above a 10% walk rate really every year of his entire career outside of his rookie season, which he played 32 games with 80 plate appearances. Every single year outside of that, he's had a walk rate north of 10%, north of 11% in 5 seasons, like five of those other 7 seasons. Like he's someone who will get on base for you if you need him to, and like he'll keep the line moving. Like he had a 327 on base percentage last year, despite a 224 batting average. It was around 36% in those two previous seasons, and then 40% in 2020 and 2021. Like he's like a solid hitter, and I think he's just continued to add more power as time goes on. And maybe that he's compromised some of his batting average to get more power, but now he'll be in a position where he'll have plenty of RBI chances with Lindor, with Soto, with Alonso. Like, what much more can you ask for if you're him in that position?
Yeah, if you ask me if he's on his A game and Lindor can still be productive without going into a slump and has to play in the leadoff spot, I would love if Nimmo was the leadoff man so it can add more flexibility for the rest of that lineup because you have Lindor batting second and then you have Alonso and then you slide Soto in as the four man. Um, or like a mix of like those four. But yeah, like that top half of that Mets order is going to be really really fun to watch. I think the Mets play your Yankees in I think April or like early part of the season. Like Soto returns to Yankee Stadium, so that's gonna be I will be seated for that absolutely. But yeah, I like the Mets. And yeah, I'll take the slight under on 90.5 wins. But yeah, very, very intriguing. I think the Mets are probably the most interesting team out of every team in the NL East, just based off the moves they made and the potential that they have with the moves they made, of course. Um, but yeah, so we'll move on to Philadelphia. Obviously the Phillies. They brought in Jesus Luzardo from Miami, remembered one at least, but um, and they're slated at 91.5 wins this year. And obviously they won the division last year, winning 95 games. Um, Matt, I'll give you the floor with Philadelphia. Obviously, you have the core of Schwarber, Harper, Trey Turner. They've tried to trade Castellanos, but obviously they've made moves to try to increase that window for the Phillies. So let's talk about Philadelphia.
I thought this team was gonna make the World Series last year. After not making it, like in the preseason, of course, thought they were gonna make the World Series last year. After coming just shy in 23, and I still think this team has like a World Series ceiling. I think my biggest hesitation with that is the bullpen, or at least like the back of the bullpen, because like not that it's not that it's bad, but I've never been someone. I wasn't like very high on Jordan Romano. Like I know he did the Blue Jays one, and like he was awful last year. I think he'll Water will reach its level this year, but I still don't feel like great about it. Obviously, I mean I think Alvarado's fine. I think I don't know if you say Orion, whatever. He's okay. Jose Ruiz is okay. Tanner Banks is you know okay. Like they have guys who are like solid contributors, but I think like for this team, I feel great about the rotation with Wheeler. I love Christopher Sanchez, and I think he in spring he's like added more velocity. And he's been someone that's been just a lot of fun to watch. Uh, just a big southpaw on the bump. Obviously, you mentioned they traded for Jesus Lazardo, who I know he was banged up with injuries. It was last year, right? 2 years
Yes.
ago. Like but he was a like there was a span of there where he was he wasn't Sandy Alcantara, of course, but he was one of their best arms in that rotation outside of Sandy. And you add him, and he's your number 5 like that. You're in a really good spot. Obviously, I love their lineup. Like I know Trey had his lumps with Philadelphia over the years, but he's been a rock solid contributor. Obviously, I think Bryce is like a perennial MVP candidate when he's healthy and ready to go. Alec Boehm, I think, was like much better last year. Obviously, Schwarber adds a whole lot of thump to that lineup at the top of the lineup as a leadoff hitter. Although Fangraphs has him as the projected 4 hitter right now. Castellanos is someone that you mentioned. I think JT Real Muto, like, I mean, he's entering his age 34 season. He's dealt with a lot of wear and tear as the catcher over his career. But he was still like you know, above a league average hitter last year. And then you round that out with Stoughton, Brandon Marsh. Like, you're looking at like a pretty deep, pretty good lineup. They added Max Kepler this offseason to play left field. Like, this is a really good team. But if I were to have like one hesitation, it'd be the back of the bullpen. But that's something that I don't know what Dave Dombrowski's plans are, like how many prospects they have. But if they do have any prospects, he'll probably be trading them away by the deadline. Yeah. So
The
if they can
door.
if they could, shore that up, if they catch any injuries in the lineup or the rotation, you could shore that up as well. Like, I still think this is like a really good team. What's their over under?
Their over under is 90 and a half or 91 and a half. Sorry.
I think this is like a slide over. I
Hmm,
think this is a slide over. Maybe that's
okay.
optimistic. You have a lot of teams like lumped together. It could go a lot of different ways for each of the three. I know we'll talk
Yeah.
about Atlanta a little bit, but
Yeah. It's not a hot take to say either the Braves, Phillies, or Mets could win or winning the division this year or winning
not the
90 plus
Marlins.
games. Shoot, you know what? You may have had me on that. We got Miami. Miami, move out of the way, Philadelphia. Uh, Atlanta, we
Sandy
don't care that
Alcantara's
Ronald
coming.
Acuna is coming back. Like Miami, Jesus Sanchez for MVP. You know, so with Philadelphia, I think an underrated signing is the acquisition of Max Kepler. Obviously, if he's healthy, when he's right, I believe it was 2023 when he had probably his best season or his second best season. I think in a hitter's ballpark like that, I think he's gonna mash. I really like that pickup for them. I know they tried to trade not Stott. They tried to trade Alec Boehm and Castellanos, but obviously I don't think there was any takers for I think Castellanos' contract in particular. But um, I like Philadelphia. Obviously, Philadelphia has pretty much been the mainstay in that division. Obviously, if those guys are in the postseason, I would pencil them in to make the at least the championship series because obviously Atlanta probably wouldn't want to see Philadelphia again in the opening rounds. Um, but yeah, Harper is until we see him like start falling off and he's only like 32, 33, but he's still playing like one of the best or no, 31 I think he's even younger. But one of the best players in the National League or best players in all of baseball. And obviously you have Trey Turner. Rio Muto that you brought up earlier, even though yeah, he's starting to get up there in age. The fact that you have guys like big boppers like Schwarber, Harper, and even Turner, like mainly you just want him to be um even serviceable with the bat. You know, he's a really good defensive catcher, and obviously he's one of the most athletic catchers in the game. And he's even in his like as he's starting to get older, he's still one of the top catchers in the game of baseball. And
Yeah,
um obviously it's like in terms of the position of catcher, it's like you have like the great catchers and then like there's a gigantic gap between everybody else. Um but yeah, like I think Philadelphia like 91 and a half wins. I think that's feasible. I'm going to take the over on them as well. Um to your point, that starting rotation is filthy. Jesus Luzardo, with all that protection around him in terms of not necessarily having to be like the ace level guy. If he even puts up an average season, that's tremendous value for them, especially as a 5 starter. Christopher Sanchez, like that dude's like tall as all hell, if I remember, or he's a stick. But the fact that he's able to
he's
get
awesome.
that velocity up, um, like I think the fact that him, Suarez, are the backups to Nola and Wheeler. Wheeler, year in year out, is one of the best pitchers in the game of baseball, and obviously is the ace of that staff. Um, and like the Mets should regret every day that they let him go. But but to your point, yes, I don't like Jordan Romano being the closer for this Phillies team. Like
Him and
he
Jeff
was
Hoffman just switched spots, and I
pretty
feel more
much
comfortable about Jeff Hoffman than I do Jordan Romano, just
right.
in a vacuum.
But I think that's something if they're making a playoff push, that'll be something they'd address.
Yeah. Maybe they
Obviously,
get Jeff Hoffman back if Toronto stinks, I don't know.
that would be pretty funny. But so I would say the one thing I'm concerned about in terms of the offensive side or just that side of the ball is, just like their center field production. Obviously, you're kind of like not like you're gonna get from Brandon Marsh being like a really good defensive outfielder, but I think obviously I don't know how likely this would be, but I think if there was any team to trade for Luis Robert, it would be a team like Philadelphia. So I think for them, that would easily put them over the top, if you ask me, because you get tremendous outfield defense. Obviously, the health would be the main concern,
Yeah.
and maybe they can use that to bargain, probably not have to send an additional prospect or something like that. But having someone like him patrolling center field and have all that protection around him and be all he has to do is stay on the field and he'll be productive, like just like he'll be probably the steal of like pretty much the steal of the season. They can manage to land him. But yeah, that's my only thing because you get the defense of Brendan Marsh, but also you get the bat of I don't even know how to compare like his bat to anybody on that team, but pretty much it's like if you I guess pair up Nicholas Castellanos and Brandon Marsh, put them together with and then there you go, you got Luis Robert, I guess. Um, but yeah, like I think that would really put them over the top. But yeah, to your point, definitely the bullpen pitching. It's like that team can put up runs, so like that and their starting rotation could easily just win them games. So like the bullpen will be a non-factor if they're up by like 4 or 5 runs. It's okay if you give up a 3-run bomb for whatever reason, but obviously in October stuff gets it's a little bit different because you're going to need those guys to pitch in high leverage situations. You wouldn't want them to be in a position where they're pretty much spamming Jose Alvarado and then say Romano's good, but they have to keep going to him. Like I don't know about you, but I think they in some of the big postseason runs that they went on, they were using Alvarado and Hoffman a lot
Yeah.
over the course of those or so like it's more about increasing that depth. So hopefully you have some good in-house options, but if not, that may be a trade they may look into. But I think that's something Philadelphia will be able to look at and correct. But I still think they're a great team, even if they don't correct some of those things. But if something has to give, it's going to be that. But yeah, I like Philadelphia, and I think honestly they have a good case to be the division winner. Obviously, there's still one more team we got to talk about, but yeah, I like Philadelphia, so I'll take the over on them.
Yeah, I think they'll win the division. I think they'll win the
Okay.
division, but we can go into Atlanta, who's
We can
we
talk
we talked
about
about New York being a very interesting team. Atlanta's a very interesting team after all the injuries they had last year.
oh yeah. So let's switch to the fifth and final team. It's the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, as we mentioned and alluded to earlier, a lot of injuries to a lot of important players that they're going to be getting back throughout the season. Um, they are for the over under, they are slated for 93 and a half wins. So obviously, they're projected to win the division. They finished last year with 89 wins, and obviously, Matt, I'll let you dive into obviously the injury riddled season that was the Atlanta Braves last year. But kind of going into this season, how do you feel about Atlanta?
Well, Ronald Acuna Jr. was hurt for most of the entire season last year. I think it was like June or July when he got hurt. They had injuries to Michael Harris, Ozzy Albies got hurt. Like there were injuries like everywhere. Austin Riley got hurt for like a bit. And so things just kind of toppled on them. Obviously, there was the Spencer Strider. I didn't even mention him. He was like one of the best pitchers in baseball, and I think he underwent Tommy
Tommy
John
John.
last year, if I remember correctly. Like Or no, it was a, like, internal brace. It was a different injury, I think, than Tommy John. But anyway, he was out for the year, so
Yeah.
he only made, like, a couple of starts or something like that. Like, it happened very quickly into their season, and then it just kind of spiraled from there. Um, and so this was a team that dealt with a lot of injuries. They brought in Jurickson Profar, who had a career year last year with the Padres. Um, they really didn't do a whole lot else this offseason, it felt like. Um, Not necessarily something that Anthopoulos does. Like, usually he's the one, like, wheeling and dealing, or I mean, he's not like Dave Dombrowski, but, like, there's usually a few more transaction moves, it feels like. Maybe I'm completely off base with that. But they had a lot of players who were injured. A lot of them are back. I know Acuna is going to miss the start of the season. I think Strider's, like, ramping up. I don't know if he's actually made a start in spring yet. I'd have to double check that. Um, but so, like, they're still dealing with some injury, more or less. Um, but obviously once Acuna's healthy, him, Profar, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna, who had another very good season last year, like, that top five, and I'm not even factoring in, like, Ozzy Albies, who's one of the best hitting second basemen in all of baseball. Like, that's a dangerous top six just on paper. That's also assuming that Profar, again, who's had one really good season and a whole lot of mid, continues to progress as a hitter at 32 years old. That's assuming Matt Olson, like some of these other guys, bounce back into their, forms that they were in previous seasons. Because, like, the Atlanta Braves were, a 95 to 100 win team at least beforehand, before last year came, and they still won 89 games despite all this. Chris Sale obviously helped a lot with that, winning the NL Cy Young. Him finally being healthy, because I know he dealt with a bunch of injuries over his previous few seasons when he was in Boston. They traded him for Vaughn Grissom. He obviously has an NL Cy Young season, while Vaughn Grissom, deals with injuries for most of the year. I very curious to see if he's able to replicate that again, or maybe not that. I don't expect him to replicate that, but, like, him having, like, you know, a top 3 rotation arm like season. Like, if he's able to, stay healthy for 20 to 25 starts at least. Uh, he made 29 last year, sub 2 or sub 2.5 ERA. Like, he had a 6.5 WAR season. Like, I don't necessarily think that's on the table again, but you never know, I guess. Ronaldo Lopez had a sub 2 ERA, and it's very funny looking at the expected metrics because he is supposed to regress like a you know what this year. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case because obviously, that's a year by year thing. But, like, it's supposed to be a lot of regression in Ronaldo Lopez, and, like, he's still a good pitcher regardless. The guy I'm highest on is Spencer Schwellenbach, and he was a
Nasty.
guy who came up last year. He threw 120 innings. I think he didn't have much of a workload when he was in the minors, if I could remember correctly, but, like, he was someone who had, like, a 25% strikeout rate. If you look at, like, his swing and miss stuff and some of, like, the peripherals, like, he's, like, one of the best swing and miss pitchers in the entire, like, in all of baseball. Like, he had, like, a 14% swing and miss rate, or swinging strike rate, which is, like, that's, like, elite for starting pitchers. I'm expecting him over a full season. Like, again, you look at some of the starting pitchers in baseball, and, like, yeah, once they get, deeper into the season, numbers do kind of fall off a little bit, but I'm expecting him to have, like, a really strong season, assuming he's able to stay healthy. He's 24 years old. He, has very good stuff, so I'm very interested to see what his season looks like. Uh, Grant Holmes is another one who made a handful of starts last year and was good. When he did make those starts, he's your number 4. There's still obviously some question marks what that looks like over a full season. Ian Anderson's still there. It felt like, former top 5 pick, someone who was going to break out, didn't. But I want to say he was also someone who dealt with injuries last year, if I can remember correctly. But, like, I'm pulling up his numbers now. Yeah, he hasn't pitched in Major League Baseball since 2022, and he had a 5 ERA in those seasons. Um, he has your number 5. I'm very interested to see, at least in the meantime, until Strider returns. I don't know what their plans are for a 5 or 6-man rotation. That's not my job, to figure that out. I don't hate this team's bullpen, like Aaron Bummer, Pierce Johnson, Raisel Iglesias, who's 35 years old. Like, obviously, there's question marks about that just because of his age. Um, it's I think it drops off a little bit after that. After Dylan Lee, like there's some serious question marks there. I think they will address that, but I'm not sure, I guess. I was you guess I don't know how Braves fans feel, but I would imagine they would want to address that. They were wanting to address that in the offseason, right? Again, they really didn't do that much, it felt like. Um, is there over under also 90 and a half, 91 and a half? Like what
Nah, I 93 and a half.
oh, this is under. Like I think to me that's a pretty clear, just because of the division like I think I would have Philly as the separator in my head. I don't think they finish with 93 and a half. I just don't.
Hmm.
I or I don't think they finish above that unless everything does go right. Like again, I just said they were a 95 to 100 win team. It felt like perennially. I still think there's a little bit more question mark than I would like, but this is a very interesting team. Assuming Profar is able to replicate last season, assuming Osuna at age 34 is able to replicate last season, because the pressure is going to be on him to do it again with Acuna missing the start of the season. Assuming Matt Olson, who's one of the best hitting first basemen in baseball, stays healthy. Same thing with Austin Riley. Same thing with Ozzy Albies. Like they're still they still have a lot of pop. They still have a lot of firepower in that offense. I'm just very curious to see how the pitching staff shakes out with Sale, with Ronaldo Lopez. Um, when regression is expected, as I mentioned with Schwellenbach. Like I'm gonna pull up what you can go on and finish or say whatever you want to say. I'm gonna pull up Ronaldo Lopez's numbers. It's pretty staggering, actually.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the pitching side for the Braves, just for the sake of continuity. But yeah, to your point, Sale was the best pitcher in the National League last year. Obviously, reflected in winning the Cy Young finally. And the idea for their pitching staff altogether, obviously, Schwellenbach, I think he's going to be disgusting. I think he's going to be Spencer Strider Jr. in a sense. So he's gonna be just the fact that they're gonna have like it could be a three-headed monster. We can be talking about this Braves starting rotation as a three-headed monster, and going into the postseason this year, depending if everything builds well, is going to be a scary sight for a lot of teams, especially those in the postseason. Um, and yeah, Ronaldo Lopez obviously had a career season for himself last year. Um, and it's like something like that. Like I don't think he's going to be a sub 2 ERA guy again. I think for the idea, even if he takes a slight regression by comparison, that's still a tremendous 3 or 4 starter for you. Obviously having to try to right the ship while guys like Acuna and Strider are still working their way back. Um, but yeah, the bullpen as well. I'm not super concerned about it, at least at the moment. When it comes to older closers, I like the way I look at it is that they're still productive until they get Craig Kimbrell, when they can't, like, their stuff isn't there and they're just giving up home runs and giving up leads over and over and over again. And obviously people value closers a little bit differently. But with the idea, I think Raisel Iglesias, I think he's going to be in line for another good season. Especially, like, I think he was one of the best closers in the National League last year. But yeah, like I like their pitching rotation at the moment. I'm sure you have Ronaldo Lopez's his stats up right now.
Well, yeah, it's there with Iglesias. There's just more unpredictability. I mean, there's unpredictability with closers inherently. Like look at Camilo Duvall, for example. 2 years ago, he was one of the best closers in baseball. Last year, he was awful, and he got replaced by Ryan Walker, who was just utterly nasty.
Right.
Um, like just all around. Like he was exceptional last year, and so like it's a very fluky position sometimes. Again, I know to a lesser extent we just talked about Clay Holmes, how that was. Like he was regarded as one of the best closers in baseball last year, and then all of a sudden he leads baseball in blown saves and is quickly out of that job for Luke Weaver. It's just that's just the nature of being a closer, and like that's what makes some of what like Mariano Rivera did so remarkable. But that's neither here nor there. Ronaldo Lopez, yeah, sub 2 ERA last year, 292 FIP, which is solid, a 344 expected FIP, a 394 expected ERA. He's only had two other seasons in his major league career where he started at least 30 games. He started 25 last year. In those seasons, he had a 391 ERA and a 463 FIP, and that was in 2018 with the White Sox. And then in 2019, a 538 ERA with a 504 FIP. Like, not to say he's obviously a different pitcher than he was at age 25 than he is, entering his age 31 season. But like the track record for him as a starter, where he's only thrown at least 130 innings three times over his career, because most of the time he's been a reliever. And in two of those times, he was a complete disaster. And then last year, in 135 innings in a limited sample, he the strikeout numbers kind of were around his career average, or more or less around the career average, like on a per nine inning basis. And the FIP and expected ERA and xFIP, like he was in the bottom 30th percentile in baseball in hard hit rate, in barrel rate, and average exit velocity. Like it wasn't a great season from him. I mean, it was a great season from him, but like if I'm just projecting into the next season, I don't feel great about it, if that makes sense. Um, Not to say that like I think Atlanta is a little bit more pitcher friendly than Chicago. I believe I'd have to double check that, just from like a ballpark factor perspective. But like I don't feel great about Ronaldo Lopez being my number two after Chris Sale's season, where he was he looked like it was like 2017. I don't know, like I don't know if Chris Sale's going to do that again. Obviously, you're hoping a continued leap from Schwellenbach. You're hoping for Spencer Strider to be productive over a full season. You're hoping for a very capable season from Grant Holmes, but I still have questions about all of that just because of like the age factor, the regression factor in Lopez's case. I don't know. That's where I have more qualms about them finishing with more than 93 wins. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, you know, Lopez has another great season. Like I'm not completely ruling that out. I wanted to mention that just because like it was so staggering to me when I found that. And
Ye-
I don't know if he will have that again ever.
that's a fair that's a fair critique to have of him. Is that's a fair, like, everything you stated was obviously absolutely true, and it's like obviously you can credit it to Atlanta and just how they are able to, I guess, get the most out of pitchers, because obviously if you ask me, I don't think Chris Sale would have been anywhere near what he was in Atlanta if he stayed with the Red Sox. If that trade just doesn't happen, I think he may have gotten back, but I think the way that they unlocked him, in terms of, like, and the fact that he was healthy was the most important thing. But in Lopez's case, I think even if, like, as long as he doesn't go back to that, if there's a happy medium between being a 5 ERA guy and being a sub 2 ERA guy, then
Three
that's
and
a
a half. Perfect.
yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
number three, number four. And I would say and the thing that was reoccurring as you were stating some of these things about the pitchers, that I was hearing a whole lot of the word hope, and that's kind of what you need if you're a Braves fan. So a season from hell doesn't happen again, where all your key contributors are down for points in the season. I didn't even get to talk about the offensive side and like their one big acquisition with Profar from San Diego. Jurickson Profar has not been an above, or hasn't had this level of production anywhere outside of San Diego. So, and I think it's just maybe it's just like he feels better when he plays in San Diego, or I guess that's the team where like he finally gets it all together because like there was times where he could have been very well out of the league, but times when he was at Oakland, the times when he was with the Rockies, I believe the season before last, and it was like the Padres signed him to that 1 year, and then he pops off and is one of the best left fielders in the game, and then obviously he cashes in and goes to Atlanta, and I think overall I think it's a great move no matter what because that's adds such versatility and like having that much protection if healthy around him in that lineup, he can easily have another productive season again. Um, but yeah, like this is all contingent on a lot of these guys remaining healthy over the course of the season. And yeah, like Ozuna, I think Ozuna, he's probably not gonna have that level of production again, like being one of the just the top hitters in the game. But I think he'll like even if it's a slight regression, I still think in terms of like the on the field stuff, I still think he's going to be productive for them. Matt Olson, I think Matt Olson's going to be primed for a huge bounce back. Like, this is somebody who can crank 45 plus, 50 plus home runs in a season if healthy. So, they're going to need that. They're going to need guys. Obviously, you need Ronald Acuna to be healthy because that's his second ACL tear in his last 3 seasons, which is alarming. So, it's more of a matter if they can find some sort of sustainability so his knees don't keep exploding on him for the rest of his career. Um, and yeah, so like in the fact I don't know if it was Brian Snitker who said this or I can never pronounce his name. Their president of baseball ops. It was Alex Anthopoulos.
Yeah, Anthopoulos, yeah.
Okay. I think it was either Snitker or him who said that they necessarily didn't need to go out and get like any like big marquee contributors, key free agents because they have a whole free agent class coming back from injury. So which is like it's a fair thing to say and like they've been really good about getting in-house contributions. But it's more of a
Yeah.
matter of health with a lot of these guys. So offensively, like if everyone stays healthy, offensively they have one of the best offenses in the game and they showed that a couple of years ago. And on the pitching side, they have the reigning Cy Young Award winner. They have a bona fide ace and a bona fide ace in the making in Schollenbach. Like, I think Atlanta, I'll take the over just to be optimistic. I think that it could be Atlanta and Philadelphia fighting for that National League East again. I think Austin Riley, if he has a full season, he's too good to have the season he did last year, obviously with the injuries. And when he was on the field, just wasn't himself. Like this team is too good and they have too many great names up and down this roster to be not necessarily be as bad. It's just like they have too good of a team to not be in that conversation for best team in this division.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent.
Yeah, and like it's I guess we'll see because obviously the biggest thing that hurt the Atlanta Braves last year was the Atlanta Braves, and obviously with like
Yeah,
the injuries and everything. But um, it's stuff to think about. I got the over on them. I think that National League East is going to be very fun to watch. Um, I would say definitely. I would say I'll say the top three in this division is definitely going to be box office. Obviously, Mets, Braves, um, excuse me, and Phillies. Like it's gonna be fun. But yeah, we covered all the teams in the National League East. Matt, if you have any lasting thoughts on any of the teams we covered today, I'll hand the floor to you. But
I do not.
but but yeah, like spent an hour. I feel like we got everything we needed to get out. But regardless, guys, let us know who you think is the best team in the National League East. How did you feel about some of our opinions on the teams? Do you think some teams should or some of our takes should have been over or under when we said one or the other? But if you guys did enjoy the content, please check us out on Vedetta Sports Media to stay up to date with all your favorite sports and check out Matt's stuff on there. He posts a lot of great blogs and a lot of great content over there as well. Stay tuned because we're going to be covering the Central Divisions next time around. But yeah, like this video, share it around, subscribe to Vedetta's YouTube. We're growing something big here. We'd love for you to be a part of it. A lot of mishaps like that will be happening as well. So it's a fun time. We would love for you guys to join the crew. But with all that being said, guys, that's been Matt Hannafan. I've been Germani DePena, and we'll see you guys next time for the Central Division.